What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of After the Whistle. I hope you all had a great Thanksgiving with your family. I know I did. Man, I'm telling you, I ate too much. We were just talking about that. Me and some friends were just talking on the phone earlier about it. Thanksgiving always, man. You eat way too much. I feel like right now, I didn't eat much at all today, really. I'm still in like a, recovery mode, so to speak. It's just one of those things where Thanksgiving, man, you wake up, you go to lunch with your family, you eat lunch, you take a nap, you wake up from the nap, you eat some more, you fall asleep again, just all day, just eating and eating and eating. It's, it takes you a few days to kind of recover from it. It's kind of like it takes you just a few days to just really get over the food, whatever you want to call it. I mean, some people call it a food coma, some people have other names for it, whatever you call it. But either way, welcome back to the show. Going to recap the action from Week 13 from Rivalry Week. I'm going to say that slow going forward because, I know I said it on last week's episode. You can get a little tongue-tied when you say that. So, recapping the action from that. Also going to preview, some college football playoff, some of the picture, the college football playoff picture kind of presented itself a little more clear this past weekend after the results of some of the games. Also, some coaching carousel things, just wild events have happened between, Lane Kiffin and between some coaching hires and everything else. So we'll get into that as well on this show today. First, before we do that, I will say, you can listen to the show wherever you're listening to. Thank you. But you can listen to the show on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Amazon. Be sure to like and subscribe to the show. Like and subscribe to the channel on YouTube, Spotify. Leave me a rating, whatever you want to do, man. Appreciate it. Whatever you decide to do, whether you listen, whether you subscribe, whether you leave a rating, appreciate it. Either way, tell your people about it. And let's get that listener count up. What say you? So, all right, jumping right into things. So Lane Kiffin, now the matters have been put to rest, so to speak. The Lane Kiffin that has been rumors for weeks now. People have been talking about where's he going to go. LSU. That is the destination for Lane Kiffin. It was announced. It was kind of a weekend long thing. And I don't know if anybody, if you watched the Egg Bowl like I did, you might have gotten tired of, my thing is when there's coaching rumors and there's coaching carousels and there's rumors out there in the college football media space, I feel like some people get a little carried away in the sense that we're talking about a football game's going on, right? Ole Miss, Mississippi State. And 80% of the broadcast was about Lane Kiffin. I mean, I understand that it's a big hot button issue right now in college football. It's an issue that a lot of people, have an opinion on or whatever else. But when we're watching a football game featuring Mississippi State and Ole Miss, and we're just wanting to watch a good football game, we're wanting to watch a football game. It wasn't really a good football game, but we're wanting to watch a football game. We do not want to hear what your thoughts are on where you think Lane Kiffin should go. You are literally in the broadcast booth to call the play-by-play or be a color commentator for that football game. We don't want to hear Lane Kiffin's name, every third or fourth thing out of your mouth is about, well, if I was Lane Kiffin, I'm telling you, I'd really want to think about if I could say. No one cares, dude. Just call the game. Do your job, okay? Leave all the coaching talk, leave the coaching carousel talk to the people outside of the football game. If you're paid to call a football game, paid to hear you call the football game, But either way, it's been revealed now. Lane Kiffin's going to LSU. He's going to be in Baton Rouge next season, and which is kind of what everybody thought. For a while there, I was under the impression he was going, but then for a minute there, with all the political things surrounding the school, with the governor coming out and doing his little thing, a few weeks ago, and a lot of the drama that was surrounding the football program with the Brian Kelly thing, with them trying to deny his buyout money and try to say they were terminating him with cause. there was just so much drama surrounding that program that I thought for a minute, I was like, you know what, Lane Kiffin might take a step back and really think about this and think that the LSU job might be a little bit too volatile for him, so to speak. He might not want to go there and deal with the drama and deal with everything else that comes with that job. However, now he's going. Ole Miss, it's being reported now, Pete Golding will be the new head coach of the Ole Miss Rebels. It's being reported also by Keith Carter, the athletic director at Ole Miss, is saying that it is a permanent move. So Pete Golding will not be the temporary head coach. He will be the permanent head coach. So everybody has an issue and everybody has their opinion on this matter. And here's what I will say. LSU's a better job than Ole Miss. If you don't think that, get over it. Okay? It is. It's always been a better job. It has been a better job. It is a better job. It always will be a better job. Ole Miss will always be, or LSU will always be a better job than Ole Miss. It's just a fact of life. Just as sure as the sky's blue, LSU's a better job than Ole Miss. If you don't agree with that sentiment, then you're either one, an Ole Miss fan, or two, absolutely clueless. And you have no idea where you're at because LSU's a better job than Ole Miss. Glad we established that. Now let's move on. So it's not a question that people leave jobs for better jobs all the time. Even in the space like that I'm in, even in the space that you're in, perhaps, or whatever else. The same thing rings true in the college football space, and coaches are going to leave for better jobs all the time. It's not just a fact of, you can. Lane Kiffin had it all in Oxford, all that was possible for him to have in Oxford. He had the support of the fans. He had, the support of the team. Obviously, he had the support of the athletic director and everything. Had a lot of fan support. The fans adored him. He brought, the first 11-win season. One of the winningest coaches in Ole Miss history, even though he was on there 6 years, won a lot of games. And, the fans loved him. But there's still jobs out there that are better than what he had. And LSU's clearly one of them. So he's now going to be going there. And apparently the talk is that he wanted to coach through the playoff. He wanted to coach the team through the playoff, wanted to kind of finish what he started. It was apparently denied by the athletic director, Keith Carter. And we're hearing now that it was a bad breakup, so to speak. So you can always understand that when somebody leaves for a better job, you can always wish them well. And I've been in a management position for many years now, and I can tell you that when an employee comes to you and says, "Hey, boss, I'm leaving. I've got a better opportunity down the road at this place. They're going to pay me more. They're going to do this, whatever." I'm never going to fault a man for taking a better job and taking a better job and feeling like he's doing a better job at providing for his family. Because as a man, that's really what one of your sole purposes in life is, to provide for your family and look out for you and yours, take care of your family. That is one of the number one goals of a man in this life. And, that I'm never going to hate a man for taking a better job. Here's what I will say. I did not like the fact that we felt, and this is probably not all at fault of Lane Kiffin. This might be a little bit more fault of the Ole Miss athletic staff. The athletic director, Keith Carter, might be a little bit more on his end. I don't know. Not there, not too close to the story to really, don't want to speculate too far into it and make some false accusations or anything like that. What I will say is, the whole college football world was just kind of like hanging on a thread, waiting on this decision. If you're old enough to remember about when LeBron left Cleveland to go to South Beach, and it was this big ordeal made out of it. It was the decision, and you still remember the interviewer there talking about, where are you going to go? He's like, I'm going to take my talents to South Beach. We still remember that, and that felt like what this was. The whole college football world was just kind of hanging on. Where's this guy going to go? And now it's, we found out now, but now this thing is kind of blown up. So now apparently the Ole Miss fans were going to be mad at Lane Kiffin regardless. Lane Kiffin could have come out and cut them all a check for $10,000 and they'd still find a way to complain and moan about it. It is what it is. You're a fan base. You have a coach that you like. That coach decides to leave. I get it. It's the way the world works. You hate the guy now. Understood. But in the way that this transpired over the last couple days, where Lane Kiffin was set to meet with Keith Carter, they met. Apparently the meeting didn't go very well because Lane Kiffin asked he wanted to coach the rest of the season and see this thing through. Keith Carter said no. Lane Kiffin then threatens to poach the staff, poach players, you name it. Apparently it was very messy. Then now he was supposed to meet with the players today, this morning. That meeting got pushed back to the afternoon. And then Lane Kiffin apparently never met with the players. So I'm sure more details will come out about this. About the fact that he didn't address the players and why and the reasons why and everything. I'm sure we'll find out the details. But here's my take on this, and I'm just going to hypothetically say this, right? If Lane Kiffin did not address his players, and it was just because he didn't want to address the players, like, it'd be one thing if Keith Carter said, no, you're not going to go in there and talk to the players, and he couldn't, or whatever. It'd be one thing about that. But it'd be one thing to be that. But if he didn't talk to the players just because he didn't want to talk to the players, I feel like that's a new low, even for Lane Kiffin. And we've seen Lane Kiffin be a guy that can do some shady stuff over the years, right? USC fans, Tennessee fans, y'all with me? So we've seen him do these type of things. We saw him, leave Tennessee, and then we saw just all the drama that ensued there, and you name it. Goes to USC. So here's what I think. Lane Kiffin releases a statement talking about he wanted to see it through. Feel like he owed it to the players. Okay. If you owed it to the players to continue coaching them through the playoff, you at least owed it to your players to have a meeting with them and talk with them. And if Lane Kiffin didn't meet with his players because he just didn't want to meet with them, that's the sleaziest thing I've ever heard. Like, that we got a new running for sleaze bag of the year right there. Like, that is, to me, an all-new low even for Lane Kiffin. If that is exactly what happened, and he didn't meet with the players because he didn't want to. Now, if it comes out that he didn't meet with the players because the athletic director didn't allow him to meet with the players, that's different. But I'm sure we'll find out more about that. And I'm sure this drama, this saga is not over. We will continue to find out more about this. Either way, the bottom line is Lane Kiffin left Ole Miss for a better job. Deal with it. The matter of which he left, you might not agree with. I don't fully agree with it. If it is in fact what some people are reporting, that he just up and left and chose not to talk to the players. If he did that, then, my opinion on that is what I just stated. That's low. That's a new low. That's sleazy, whatever you want to call it. So that's that. But he did leave for a better job, and we're not going to pretend like he didn't, right? So like I said, we'll find out more about that in the days to come. More details will come out regarding it, whatever. Sure, we haven't heard the last of it, especially the fact that, hey, just in case you didn't know, if we're looking ahead to 2026, LSU goes on the road to play Ole Miss in Vaught-Hemingway Stadium next year. So the story just writes itself. It's just the drama going to build for that one. So we saw what happened the first time he went into Neyland Stadium with Ole Miss, and y'all remember the mustard bottle and golf balls incident. Y'all all remember that. So that's, it's definitely going to be interesting, is all I'm going to say to that. So some more notable hires in the college football space. It was reported today that the new head man at Auburn University is going to be Alex Galesh from USF. Don't know how I feel about that hire just yet. Well, that'll be one that I think we're going to have to keep an eye on that one. Because a guy that's been a coordinator, a proven coordinator, more of a Heupel guy, under Heupel at Tennessee a few years ago when Tennessee had that really good run with Hendon Hooker, Jalen Hyatt, you name it. That was Alex Galesh calling the plays for that offense. So definitely has the coordinator experience there. He's a very established coordinator. Down at USF, got some key wins, beat Florida this year. Definitely has been formidable in the American Athletic Conference. Definitely been kind of getting his bearings about him as a head coach. Didn't really think that he was quite at the level to be considered for a job like Auburn, but like either way, here we are. Alex Galesh is going to be coaching the Auburn Tigers next year. Ryan Silverfield, Memphis head coach, going to Arkansas. I feel like that's a pretty good hire there. So Silverfield's a little bit more established, as a head coach than Galesh. So, I feel like he'll do well there in Arkansas. Florida finally hires their man, John Summerall, which is kind of the guy that they've zeroed in on over the last couple weeks. Rumors reported a few days ago, that they were out of the Lane Kiffin sweepstakes, which pretty much guaranteed him to LSU, and Florida has hired John Summerall out of Tulane. And that's another one to me that I like John Summerall. I like him as a coach. I like his philosophy. I like everything, that he preaches. But this is another instance where I'm seeing some Florida fans online that have already been talking about it today. Like, is this another Billy Napier 2.0? Like, here's what I say. Give the guy a chance. I think John Summerall is an upgrade from Billy Napier. I really do. But only time will tell when it comes to that, because you never quite know how a lot of these coaches at the group of five level, you never really know how they're going to pan out until they get hired. You really don't. All right. You hit on you have some group of five coaches that come up, get a Power 4 job. They turn out to be really good. More times than not, they underachieve. And, it's just a matter of wait and see what he does, really, is what it's going to come down to. And then also, like I said, Lane Kiffin to LSU, Pete Golding is going to be the permanent head coach at Ole Miss. I didn't think Lane Kiffin would take Pete Golding with him to LSU because Pete Golding's defenses are not that good. But I mean, there was a metric out there earlier that said that, he's been in the top 30 in total defense the last 3 years. I don't know where they're pulling those numbers from, but that's not true. Last year they were a lot better on defense. Last year was a really good year for Pete Golding on defense there at Ole Miss, but the other 2 years have been just kind of middle of the road. Hadn't been really good, like middle to bottom tier of the conference in the SEC. So, not really a guy that I figured that Lane would retain, so to speak. If that, if we could do a little bit of a rhyme there. So, a little bit of coaching carousel talk there to start the show, and I'm going to start recapping the games here in just a second. One key point I want to talk about. We will have the rankings tomorrow night. These will be not the final rankings, but these will be the final rankings before championship weekend. And then after championship weekend, we will have Selection Sunday. So these rankings are important because it's going to show you where these teams are positioned at before championship weekend. We'll have a good idea of, who's, not. You don't want to ever use the term who can afford to lose. You don't want to use that terminology, but the positioning of these rankings, regardless of what you think of people saying all the time, teams shouldn't be penalized for, losing their conference. I'm not one that I don't disagree with that, but I feel like if there's a more deserving team that could be put in the playoff, that's not playing for a conference championship, I don't know. It's a slippery argument. We've had it years past. We've had it in years before, so I'm sure we will have it again this year. We will have it. If Georgia beats Alabama in the SEC championship, we're going to have that argument. Does a 10-3 Alabama with a loss to Florida State deserve a spot in the playoff? And we'll talk about that, obviously, later in the week when we talk about the predictions of championship weekend on the prediction show. We'll get into that a little bit more. but those arguments are coming. So tomorrow night we will get the rankings. And one thing I want to watch before we get into the recap of the weekend's action, one thing I really want to look out for tomorrow is, where is Miami going to be? Because, we've talked about Miami. We've talked about this Notre Dame-Miami comparison. We know that Miami has the head-to-head over Notre Dame. We look at the common opponents. Miami coming off of this win this past weekend against Pitt. They beat them 38-7. Notre Dame beat the same Pitt team 37-15. So advantage Miami on that one. Miami beat NC State 41-7. Notre Dame beat NC State 36-7. So common opponents, two common opponents there. Miami performed better against both. So just a little bit there. And then also the field test, the actual head-to-head, Notre Dame owns it. So the question is, where's this committee going to put Miami? Where are they going to put them? Are they going to put them at, close? They're going to put them at 11, 12, somewhere in there, like 10? We'll see. Definitely going to be interesting where they're put, because it's, there's some things that can happen that could force that conversation. Like I said, with an Alabama loses to Georgia. Alabama currently going to be probably 9th, 8th, 9th, 10th, somewhere in that neighborhood on the rankings release. Alabama loses. Do we make the argument that Miami deserves to slide into that final spot? We'll see. That is something definitely to be talked about at a later date, especially after the rankings. So going into the recap of this weekend, going to start off with some rapid-fire games first, and then get in more in-depth to the bigger contest that we saw as we at the aforementioned Egg Bowl, earlier in the podcast. Ole Miss beats Mississippi State 38-19. Game wasn't really eventful at all. I mean, if you watched it, there for a minute it was somewhat competitive. I know that I made a mistake on the podcast last week talking about the quarterback situation for Mississippi State. I meant to say Camario Taylor, but I said Van Buren. Van Buren was quarterback in LSU. He transferred from Mississippi State to LSU during the offseason last year. Mississippi State has Camario Taylor. Sometimes even the best of us make mistakes, so y'all bear with me on that one. But Camario Taylor playing for Mississippi State. Mississippi State has their quarterback of the future in Camario Taylor. I mean, I felt like he looked good enough given the circumstances. I mean, this was a big spot for him to perform in. He did okay. Not, didn't really knock your socks off. However, he did have 173 rush yards. So this is an area that they can exploit. Get him better as far as, passing the football. He passed for 178 yards, which isn't horrible, but he's 15-31 with an interception. So needs to be more accurate throwing the football. But, man, he can be an absolute weapon whenever he develops more as a passer. He is only a freshman, so, he's going to make freshman mistakes. But if he develops more as a passer, look out, because that kid is good. And especially the fact the runner that he is. I mean, 20 rushes for 173 yards, 178. I mean, the kid in his first Egg Bowl has over 350 yards of offense himself. I mean, he was essentially the Mississippi State offense. I mean, an offense that had 440 total yards, he accounted for 350 of them. I mean, the future is really bright for that kid is all I'm going to say about that one. But then likewise, you had on the other side, Trinidad Shambles just continues to just ball out, man. 359 yards through the air, 23 of 34, 4 touchdowns, adds some yardage on the ground there. Kewen Lacey, 143 yards. Just Ole Miss looked really good on offense in this football game, which is what you can expect from this team, which has been so dynamic all year on offense. Mississippi State just couldn't really stop them. Ole Miss with 545 yards of total offense. Didn't turn the ball over. They played pretty disciplined. Only 5 penalties committed, but 186 rush yards. They ran the football well, threw the football well. Just couldn't do any wrong in the Egg Bowl, and then just pretty much double up Mississippi State, which I didn't bet Mississippi State in this one. Like I bet at Ole Miss. I bet Ole Miss to cover, and that's exactly what happened. And I didn't think anything different would happen in that regard. So the Arizona State, that was a game that I felt like Arizona State was kind of on this upswing. Man, they just got dragged by Arizona. 23-7 the final score in that one. Not really just an impressive performance by Arizona, by Noah Fafita and that offense. Just a kind of a shocker, I'll be honest with you. It wasn't a game that I really paid close attention to. I mean, I was kind of bouncing back and forth and around and everything. I didn't watch, it's not like I can watch every single snap of every single game. But in the bouncing back and forth that I did at this game, it was a game where Arizona State was just completely overmatched, from the jump. Never was able to establish the run. Sims at quarterback for him. We know about the issues with Sam Leavitt, with, him kind of exploring his options mid-season. This is just the monster that we've created. Don't get me into that soapbox. We'll make this episode last 4 hours if we talk about that. So the monster that we've created in college football has produced the situation that they have at Arizona State. Sam Leavitt not playing quarterback for him. He's exploring other options, trying to transfer, whatever. That's quitting on your team. If you do that, you're sorry. You're just a terrible human being if you're going to do that midseason. But either way, what we can expect for Jeff Sims. Yes, that Jeff Sims. You're not hearing that wrong. I think he's been playing college ball since I graduated high school, seems like. But 3 picks, 11 of 25, 114 yards. Just a lot of turnovers in this game for Arizona State. A lot of costly penalties, a lot of mistakes. Couldn't really get anything going. That was the story of the game to me, was just not able to establish anything on offense. They got absolutely hammered in the metric on time of possession. I mean, Arizona had 40 minutes of time of possession, and Arizona State had 19 minutes and some change. So just 5 turnovers. When you commit 5 turnovers and you hold the ball for less than 20 minutes in a 60-minute football game, you are going to get your tails whipped. And that's exactly what happened with Arizona State in this football game. So, like I said, rapid fire through a few of these. Texas Tech beats West Virginia 49-0. Easy day for Texas Tech. Oregon beats Washington 26-14. Did put Oregon on a little bit of an upset alert in this one, but they powered right on through it. Really no contest. Oklahoma squeezes by LSU 17-13. Needed a last, a bomb pretty much to win this football game late. Satania catches a 58-yard touchdown pass from John Mateer, if you watched it, to go up 17-13 late with about 4 minutes left in the football game. That was the score that made up the difference in this football game. And it was a really good. I mean, both of these teams played pretty good defense in this football game. LSU tried to spoil this, thing for Oklahoma. Oklahoma's just got to chill out with the turnovers. 3 turnovers, 3 picks thrown by Oklahoma. When we're talking about Oklahoma making the college football playoff, and we're talking about them playing these teams in the CFP, this is an area of concern for Oklahoma, and it continues to rear its ugly head. You cannot continue to turn. I don't care how good your defense is, okay? Oklahoma's defense is one of the best in the country, one of the tops in the SEC, no doubt. But you cannot expect to continue to turn the ball over at the rate that they're turning the football over and win football games, especially when the competition starts to heat up in the CFP. You cannot turn the ball over 3 times. You're going to get waxed if you do that. I don't care how good your defense is. I don't care how good Kip Lewis is. I don't care how good any of those guys are. You're going to get beat in the CFP if you keep turning the football over 2 and 3 times a game. You can't do it. You can't beat the good teams like that. And this is a game that Oklahoma should have lost. I mean, aside from a busted coverage, they did lose it, because that's exactly what happened on that play to Satania down the field, was a busted coverage. So he's wide open. There was nobody within 20 yards of him. They scored that touchdown, win 17-13. But other than that, this was a game that was Ole Miss's to lose. They lost it. And you could make the argument LSU. You could make the argument that LSU should have won it. It's a valid argument. And little bit of luck on Oklahoma's side, a little bit of a mistake in the coverage, and they're here 17-13. They win, and they will most likely be in the college football playoff. Notre Dame bludgeoned Stanford 49-20. Not much to talk about there. Notre Dame's just continuing to, run through the schedule that they've got. Y'all know my thoughts on that one. Alabama squeaks by Auburn 27-20, and man, what a game this was. I mean, Cam Coleman, Auburn is driving down the field to potentially score a touchdown to tie this one up, send it to overtime. Cam Coleman fumbles very late in the football game with a minute and some change left. Fumbles, Alabama recovers, ball game, 27-20. The Iron Bowl continues to produce one of the best games in college football every season. And I'm not going to argue that point like that. It's always going to be one of the best games in the country every single year because of the level of football that we see. Those teams hate each other. They want to beat each other. Auburn wanted nothing more than to spoil Alabama's season. And that's like I was saying on the prediction show last week. A win against Alabama for Auburn doesn't just mean bragging rights. It means you pretty much eliminate Alabama from the SEC championship game, and you eliminate Alabama from playoff contention. That you're basically ending Alabama's hopes and dreams, crushing them with a win there on Saturday. But Alabama, they got that championship DNA that a lot of people talk about that only a few teams have. Like, don't get me started on that. You can't make the argument that teams like Indiana have championship DNA because they've never won anything. So the teams that have, like an Alabama, like a Georgia, like an Ohio State, these teams have that championship DNA. They have that, their mettle gets tested. They rise up to the occasion and they win. And that's what Alabama did. Bray Hubbard forces the fumble there late on Cam Coleman. Alabama wins, and now Alabama will face Georgia for the chance to win an SEC championship this Saturday. But all in all, great game. I mean, I'm not going to lie. It was I felt like Auburn would make Alabama sweat. I picked Alabama in that spot. Felt like Auburn would make them sweat. I think Auburn did. But Alabama moves on. Alabama survives. One of the shockers of the weekend, Vanderbilt beat the brakes off of Tennessee. And I felt like this game, I picked Tennessee in this spot, felt like this game was going to be a shootout. Felt like we were going to see, a 38-37 or 38-35 or something like that. We were just going to see both teams clear 30 points with ease. However, Tennessee not able to do that. 45 points Vanderbilt's way, 24 points Tennessee's way. Just completely annihilating any spread, any betting odds, whatever. I mean, it was just a complete and total domination for Vanderbilt. Puts up 579 total yards of offense, 314, yes, you heard that right, 314 yards on the ground. And if that doesn't make matters worse, Vanderbilt beat Tennessee 45-24, and they turned the ball over 2 times. This game could have been a lot worse than it was. Just an utterly embarrassing performance from the Tennessee Volunteers in this one. A team that sometimes this year has looked good. Sometimes they've looked bad, but that defense eventually was going to get, the defense has been getting gashed for the most part of the year, but man, did Vanderbilt just take advantage. This was a woodshed beating. They beat them pillar to post in Neyland at night, which is something a lot of teams don't do. And little old Vanderbilt just smacked them around 60 minutes. Pavia's in the locker room smoking a cigar, talking about, we run Tennessee. We saw the clip of him on Bussin' with the Boys before the football season, talking about how Vanderbilt was going to be the standard in Tennessee. Tennessee fans all up in arms about it. He can't say that. Well, y'all were all mad about it. Y'all were all pissed off about him saying it. Well, here we are. 45-24. Tore them up. That's just a woodshed beating. And, Vanderbilt, best team in Tennessee. They can make the argument now. They are. So, you win the football game, you make the argument. You win the football game by 21 points, you make the argument for sure. Vanderbilt's best team in Tennessee. Miami beats Pitt by 31 points. Just talked about that. Miami still on the outside looking in, not going to the ACC championship, but still on the outside looking in, betting odds and everything into the college football playoff, which I'm sure we will talk about more later in the week on that one as well. Virginia handily beats Virginia Tech 27-7. Virginia going to the ACC Championship. Cal, another shocker of the weekend. Cal beats SMU 38-35. Tulane blanks Charlotte 27-0. So, 2 more games we got to talk about here. Actually, 3 more games, excuse me. So, Georgia Tech, we'll start with this one. Clean old-fashioned hate there, played in Atlanta on Friday night. What in the world? Like, or Friday afternoon. It was mid-afternoon game. Sorry about that. But I've seen mixed emotions and mixed reviews from Georgia fans all over talking about this was a game where Georgia was flat. Georgia didn't play good. I'll agree. Gunnar Stockton did not play good at all. Like, at all. But to hold Georgia Tech to 9 points is a pretty good feat in of itself. To hold them to 3 field goals, no touchdowns scored for Georgia Tech. I think that's the first time that's happened all year. I mean, you talk about a Georgia Tech team who has scored point totals this year of 27, 59, 24, 45, 30, 35, 27, 41, 36, 36, 28, and now 9. So to hold that team to 9 points, I feel like it's a feat in of itself. But an interesting game because we saw pretty much a Georgia team that we saw earlier in the season. We saw a Georgia team that struggled at times to find a rhythm. And it's weird because this is a Georgia team over the last month, really, that has been kind of on the upswing. So I get the questions. I get the questions from a lot of Georgia fans talking about, like, man, what's going on with this Georgia team? They look terrible against Georgia Tech. And I don't know so much of if both you understand, I hearken back to Brent Key when he was hired as the Georgia Tech head coach. He made the comment that he's going to work 365 days a year to dominate the other team in the state. The team is going to work 365 days a year to dominate the other team in the state. That's all Georgia Tech thinks about, beating Georgia. That's the difference between Georgia and Georgia Tech. Georgia don't give a crap about Georgia Tech until the week of the Georgia Tech game. Georgia Tech cares about Georgia all year long. That's the difference in the 2 programs. If you want to know why Georgia is Georgia and Georgia Tech is Georgia Tech, that's the perfect reason. Georgia doesn't think about Georgia Tech until the week of the Georgia Tech game. Georgia Tech is literally game planning to beat Georgia year-round, and you still can't beat them. So some mentality's got to change a little bit. But either way, Georgia Tech, just fraudulent football team from the get-go. Their record really led them to be a lot better than they really were. People were talking about playoff berth. I was like, shut up. We're not talking about that. That team just really wasn't that good. And either way, though, interesting football game, low scoring, 16-9 Dogs. Gunnar Stockton played horrible, but Georgia still ran the football effectively. Nate Frazier, 16 catches, 108 yards. Zachariah Branch, leading receiver for Georgia at 53 yards. Haynes King, Georgia for the most part held Haynes King in check, sub 200 pass yards. It hasn't done that very often this year, and only 39 rush yards on 10 carries. That was the main focal point, if you will, of this Georgia defense was Haynes King. You've got to keep him in check. And, I feel like Georgia did a really good job of that. 190 rushing yards total for Georgia, 35 minutes of time of possession. It was very clear Gunnar Stockton didn't have it from the early going, from the get-go, didn't really have it. So, therefore, had to go to plan B and just run the football, play good defense, and get out of there with a win, even though it's a narrow margin. Had to get out of there with a win. That's just how they had to play it. And I get it, Georgia fans. It's frustrating. I've seen frustrated Georgia fans. They're going to be okay. I feel like there's some drawing board material. People want to talk about message board material, or people want to talk about bulletin board material. There's some drawing board material there for Gunnar Stockton. get back to the drawing board, find out what you did wrong, get better for it. That's all you can do. That's all you can do in this game is to just analyze and get better. And thanks to the Texas Longhorns, Georgia will be right back in Atlanta in that same stadium this weekend playing Alabama. So we'll talk about the Texas and Texas A&M game next. And this was an upset that I called on last week's show. And I had people reach out to me and tell me there was no way this was going to happen. Well, there was two games. Now, I did not call Michigan to beat Ohio State. I did not do that. You can go back and check the tape on that one, so don't start. But I will say, I did come out and say that I felt like Texas was going to get the win against Texas A&M, mainly because, it was in Austin. But when you look at Texas A&M's schedule throughout this season, we can clearly see that they have not been tested. And that was an area of concern for me. When you look at their SEC opponents, bottom feeder SEC teams all year long. Just now, you can't really blame Texas A&M for that. The schedule's made years in advance. Understood. But we still have to look at it from that lens of they haven't really played anybody. Now, a lot of those games looked a lot better earlier in the season. Thought, oh man, that South Carolina game, that game, those games are going to be tough, whatever. They ended up not being. So, it was a team that I felt like hadn't been challenged physically all year. And they finally met a challenge in Austin, and they got beat by 10 points. Now, this is not to take away, this is not a Texas A&M lost this game argument. This is a Texas went in there, Darrell K. Royal, protected home field, and beat A&M. I mean, A&M's not so much like beat themselves. Like when we talk about you getting beat, I mean, yes, the two interceptions thrown definitely didn't help, the calls there for Texas A&M. But when we look at the fact that, Texas better on third down, Texas more yards, more, about the same pass yards, more rush yards, over 200, which don't know if that's happened at all this year against this Texas A&M defense, but 35 carries and 218 yards for this Longhorn offense, 6.2 yards on average a carry. And, both teams penalized about the same, 7 penalties for Texas, 8 penalties for A&M. So, but just Texas just won the football game. It's not A&M lost it. No, we're not going to do that. Texas slander, as it pertains to this game, Texas slander is not going to be tolerated because Texas won this football game fair and square. There was no, questionable calls, or there was none of that. This was a Texas wanted it more and won the football game, and everything that a lot of people thought about Texas A&M became true, and that is that little fraudulent. I'm not saying they're not a good football team. I think they're going to bounce back. We saw a football team last year that was undefeated going into their rivalry week and got beat and then ran the table through the playoff. I'm not saying Texas A&M is Ohio State, but I'm saying we've seen that a loss against your rival doesn't affect what you're doing going forward. If anything, you might get a little bit more favorable seeding. You might get a little bit more favorable side of the bracket. Who knows? Texas A&M could definitely make some noise in the playoff. I feel like they're a good enough team. They just have to go back to the drawing board and, get some things squared away. One, the turnovers, that's a big one. I mean, obviously. Other than that, played a pretty good solid game statistically. Metrics-wise, played a good game. 2 turnovers, definitely costly. Especially when you get beat 27-17. And turn the ball over twice, you got to think, man, if we don't give away those 2 possessions and we score on them, you're right there in it. So, got to think about that as well. So, shout out Texas. Arch Manning played a great football game. It's cool to see the trajectory of him, and it's cool to also see somebody that I talked so much crap about earlier in the season continue to get better and prove me wrong. Because Arch Manning, listen, he could have listened to the outside noise. He could have listened to all the people like me and other people on ESPN and all this. He could have listened to people and he could have been like, you know what, maybe they're right. Maybe I'm not that good of a quarterback. But instead, he went to work, he put his head down, and you see the trajectory of him now, and he's gotten a lot better. So, claps, yes. Hats off to you, Arch. It's been great. It's been great watching the growth. I will say that. So, I'm not saying I rescind all my comments that I made about him. Not saying Arch is trash or anything like that. Maybe I did say that once, and if I do, I apologize to Arch. But he's getting better. I'm not going to say he's the best quarterback in the country, like a lot of people. Fine bomb. Not going to say that he's the best quarterback, prospect since Tebow. Somebody said that, I know. But not going to call who. I just mentioned his name. But definitely the growth and improvement from Arch Manning is definitely noticeable, and it's good to see. Is all I'll say on that one. Wrapping things up with the game. Ann Arbor, Michigan. Ohio State gets their get back. 27-9, which, I thought maybe Michigan would put up a little bit of a better fight, but there was no way that I saw Michigan winning this football game. I thought maybe there was a very, very minuscule chance they could pull off an upset, but I felt like a lot had to go in their favor. Ohio State was going to have to turn the ball over a few times, 2-3 times. Ohio State was going to have to shoot themselves in the foot with stupid penalties. There was a lot that was going to have to happen. But if Ole Miss, or not Ole Miss, I got Ole Miss on the brain, I guess. If Ohio State was going to show up and play good, clean football from start to finish, Michigan had no chance. And this was a game was lopsided, for starters. But 27-9 the final in that one, as I mentioned before. Michigan didn't score a point in the second half. This game was 17-9 at halftime. It was within a score. Some people might have thought, hey, they're within one score. You never know. And then Ohio State just clamped down, and whole second half, Michigan couldn't do anything on offense, which, freshman quarterback, a lot of variables that's around there. Just you think about the fact that Michigan's a young football team, a lot of freshman quarterback, like I mentioned, starting running backs hurt. Their second string guys banged up. They're relying on a walk-on running back. So, they're not in favor of Michigan. Michigan at full strength, I think, is a little bit better. With Justice Haynes in there, I think a little bit better. But either way, I still don't see this Michigan team matching that Ohio State team in talent and physicality. Not this year. But either way, Ohio State looks great. They move on into the playoff. They're 12-0. They will be facing Indiana in the Big Ten championship game this weekend. Prediction show coming Thursday. Here's what we're going to talk about. We've got Georgia, Alabama on Saturday at 4 on ABC. For the millionth time, we got Georgia and Alabama. We got BYU, Texas Tech playing for the Big 12 championship. We have Indiana and Ohio State playing for the Big 10 championship. We have Duke, 7-5 Duke. I know I mentioned it a few weeks ago, but it came true. 7-5 Duke is playing for an ACC championship against Virginia. 7-5 Duke. Did I mention that? 7-5? Okay. 7-5 Duke playing for an ACC championship. What a time. 2025, you have been wild so far. So that's what we're going to talk about. Also, North Texas and Tulane, American Athletic Conference Championship. Both teams potentially going to be without their head coach. The head coach in North Texas takes the Oregon State job. Summerall at Tulane takes the Florida job. Potentially interim coaches coaching in the American Athletic Conference Championship. And then, all the other Power 4 Conference Championships that we will have this weekend. We will talk about Thursday on the Prediction Show. It's been a pleasure bringing college football news to you guys. I will catch y'all on Thursday as we predict the championship weekend games. See y'all.